Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Prez. This is episode 324. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Prez, that is at _Presidente on Twitter. Prez, how are you doing?
I'm hanging in there, just watching some FIBA hoops, doing some. I did a thread from a FIBA exhibition game. That's how down bad I am in the offseason.
Yeah, I saw you post that in the Discord, and I didn't want to I didn't know, I didn't say it because I was like, he might come across shitty, but I was like, fucking hell, we need NBA basketball back so badly if we're threading fucking FIBA hoops here.
You know what happened?
But
I fucking couldn't go to sleep one day, which is odd. I usually can fall asleep very easily, and I was just like, fuck it, it's 1 a.m. Let's watch some 320p. What was it? Germany versus Canada.
Yeah.
On
Get some
on
RJ.
YouTube.
I need to see RJ's trailing screens.
That's literally the kind of shit I was looking for. I'll shout them out at the end of the episode because I can't remember their name, but there's one nameless hero out there on YouTube uploading full games of exhibition games. So
don't
not
shout
all
him
heroes
out
wear capes. What do you mean? This
shout
person deserves a fucking Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, but you don't want to put his shit out there because you still want him to upload that shit, man.
Yeah, it's
right.
Spider-Man, like when his mask falls off in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and they're all like passing him over his head. Don't look at him; he's a hero.
I can't let the feds know. My bad. I was slipping.
And we do have a guest. His first time on the pod. His name is Sam Sheehan. You can follow him on Twitter at NBA Baby Secret. He goes by Jurassic Harold on there. He's also the co-host of the Ball podcast with Trillboro Dude. Sam, how are you doing?
Gentlemen, I am ecstatic to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I know there's one thing every New York sports fan wants. It's more Boston adjacent talking heads in their products. So I'm happy to fill that void. There's just not enough guys talking about Boston in the NBA media. So I'm happy to come on here and help out.
Yeah, we're always like, there's anytime we can get more ringer in our lives, we're all for it. So before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. The first being that Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strick.land on Instagram. We're posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and you haven't done so already, please hit like and then subscribe to the channel. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website, which is at www.thestrick.land. You can find a link on there to the store. We have t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, even water bottles, you name it. We've got it. Again, you can find that on our website. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that we host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland mailbag, hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, a.k.a. the Doug Bag, alongside Dallas Miko, that comes out every other week. You also get access to the Strickland Discord, where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks and more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier that's come with a variety of additional benefits like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day. Whether you choose to subscribe or not, none of this would be possible without you. None of this would be possible without BetOnline, which is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and match reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, that was long, but we're now ready to talk about basketball, and it's very appropriate that we have you on today, Sam, because in what is a very dead period of NBA, the NBA summer, the NBA 12-month news cycle, we did get one little trickle involving a big Latvian. That would be one Kristaps Porzingis, who obviously is now a member of the Boston Celtics, your beloved Boston Celtics. and he has plantar fasciitis. He'll be out 4 to 6 weeks. He's not playing in the FIBA World Cup this summer. I'm not really sure. I don't actually think this is a big deal, but I want to go back before you even traded for Kristaps, because this is where I from the outside looking in, right? So as Knicks fans, we're fucking sitting here and we're like, okay, all I got to hear about is you get these 15 fucking guys that are national media NBA dudes. They're all got these Boston angles, and all you hear about is this team is so miserable. There's no soul. I hate the way they play. And I'm like, they're number 2 in offense. They're number 3 in defense. They got the best net rating in the league. You've got these 2 wings, Tatum and Brown.
It's also funny because usually the quote unquote soulless teams, and we were talking about this a little before the recording started, but when you think of soulless teams, you think of mercenary teams, right? But this team, they had some acquisitions, but overwhelmingly, the heart of the team,
Tatum, Brown,
Smart, Robert Williams.
Al Horford is basically a Celtic at this point.
He's like the adopted large Dominican uncle, and he's part of the family now. So you had 5 guys who were who give you that home feeling, but still, all the Celtics fans, even the ones who acknowledged this team was good, were just man, this don't sit well.
Yeah. So I what I wanted to ask is so could you, because you have this stretch, right? I think they've made 5 of the last 6 Eastern Conference Finals. They obviously lost in the NBA Finals the previous year to Golden State in 6 games. Can you explain why? And my dad's a Celtics fan, so he hated this year's team the entire year. He's just telling me I fucking hate watching this team, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, you guys are 57 wins. Shut up! I don't want to hear about this. But can you explain why it felt like this year's team just, for whatever reason, with Celtics fans, it just did not resonate, and it felt like a slog for you guys so much this year?
It kind of goes back to honestly, what we say this on the Ball podcast, and I think it's true. I think it just goes back to being fucking spoiled. It really just is. Celtics fans have had this sustained run of success, and kind of, they've had these young teams that is now kind of matured to a team that's pretty squarely in its prime. I would say, a lot of these guys on the team are, between the ages of 25 and 28, so that I think that part of that is, kind of this sustained run of success, but never getting over the hump, I think that there is, there's never really been any release. There's kind of been this thought of oh, okay, we got outfoxed by Eric Spoelstra and this bubble Miami team, but we'll be back next year. And then it's Jaylen Brown's hurt, and you run into this, the only time this Nets team was healthy in the playoffs, and you just get smacked, and everyone felt bad then. And, Brad Stevens leaves, and then it's okay, new coach, Ime Udoka. There was a lot of angst about Ime early on in his coaching career, but then, everyone was pretty squarely in his corner by the time that finals run happened. And then everyone was pretty squarely not in his corner the following offseason for obvious reasons. And then you end up with Joe Mazzulla coaching the team. And you just, I think it's, there's a little bit of entitlement there. I mean, I think that there is, I'm pretty much at this point just a Celtics fan. I'm not really a Boston sports fan. And I think that those are kind of.
Were you before though?
Oh, I was before in my younger days, but again, to go back to the mercenary thing, it felt awesome the first time the Patriots won the Super Bowl. I didn't really care. Later on down the line, there's a certain I would trade. You guys have probably seen those prompts that go around about how many. If you could only have 5 titles in your life, how would you allocate them amongst your sports teams? I would trade pretty much every title of my lifetime except the 2001 Super Bowl and the 2004 Red Sox run for any this Celtics group winning with Marcus Smart and Robert Williams, just because this was my team. I watched them I'd from basically build this team from the ground up. I was watching Brandon Bass and Chris Humphries and Marshawn Brooks and those guys for like
great deep cuts.
You're right. And like, I mean, I don't want to like, I know it was only like a few years, Celtics fans are still crazy spoiled by that thing. But I think part of that is just there is like a little bit of a psychosis going on with like, I think Celtics fans really thought they would like win a title by now. And then it just seems to be kind of going backwards. And that's how you end up with things like, the heart and soul of the team, Marcus Smart getting, traded to Memphis and everyone being like, yeah, this is good. Like this will help the team, be better.
One quick question. How much, what kind, like, that was a really insightful description of like the things that have led to this mindset among a large portion of the fan base.
Mm-hmm.
What
we can both identify with that as Yankees fans.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, it's probably a very similar thing. Like, the 90s, honestly, it was probably like a similar thing to like New York. Honestly, it's probably a pretty similar feeling to like New York after like the 2009 Yankees title. Giants won in 2008, stomped out that 18-1 to the Patriots. Like you had that 90s run. There's like a lot of, so you guys are probably pretty familiar with that feeling of like, wow, we just win so much. It's starting to get boring at this point.
I never had that shit because by the same time I was a Yankees fan, I was a Knicks fan. So we had the mental balance out here. Unlike, see, your problem is y'all had no Knicks. Y'all had just success from all these fucking teams. Yeah, except for Boston, and I'm
a Bills
got their shit together.
Yeah,
and I'm a Bills fan, so no success.
Shwin is the most appreciative motherfucker on Twitter, which you wouldn't know if you only looked at his tweets. But the question I was going to ask is, like, how does play style factor into this? Because especially early on last season and also the season before, I think particularly on offense, I think everybody was like, I love the defense. There's nothing weird or like questionable about it. This is our identity. Defense. Look at all these motherfuckers who can defend and switch and do all this stuff, even whether it's Stevens or Udoka or this guy, like the guys execute most of the time, although a little bit less often last season, but still most of the time. But on offense, like people would often reduce, myself included, reduce the offense to a little bit of just like bombs away. And obviously you don't get like a top offense by only just bombs away, but there were a lot of really good shooters and they did fire away. And I think sometimes, especially with just the level of talent on the teams, it was like, shouldn't we be doing something more nuanced or more complicated? Like this indescript, ambiguous, like, are we leaving something on the table? Is this going to bite us in the ass?
Yeah.
Do we need to lean into Tatum's inner Kobe?
Well, and that's kind of like unironically. So I want to be clear because I've got to kind of draw a little bit of a line between myself and like most Celtics fans because I am very much in the minority on a lot of what I'm about to say. I think this goes back to Jason Tatum in a lot of ways because I think Jason Tatum is an excellent player who I think is pretty fundamentally misunderstood because I actually think he's like he's definitely a very good offensive player, but I think he gets way too much credit for his offense and not enough credit for his like defensive rebounding and some of the other aspects of his game. Like he's a much more well-rounded player in like a lot of ways. When I see like Jason Tatum taking over, I'm not feeling great. I'm not like, wow, this is awesome. Like you'll get games, like you'll catch a good Jason Tatum game. Like you'll catch that. I think it was game 7 against the Sixers this year when he just like is ripping their heart out. And it's like, yep, well, this is what superstars do. What you didn't see was him like stinking out the joint for like the 5 games before that. He's like quietly like one of the most inconsistent like players in the like superstars in the NBA. Now, I've had some pushback on that from other Celtics fans. They've thrown stats at me like he has one of the longest streaks of 10 points or more. I'm like, oh, awesome. I'm sorry. He gets 10 points and he shoots 20 times a game. That's awesome.
The definitive measure of consistency.
Yeah, right. So I think like, my take, I think Jaylen Brown gets like a little too much hate. I think Jaylen Brown just really stinks against Miami. Like Miami has his number for whatever reason, but Jaylen Brown, if you go back and look at pretty much every other playoff series he's played in, he's been varying degrees of okay to good. I mean, like I think his third year in the league, that hospital Celtics year, he put 30 on LeBron, like a prime LeBron with like the Cavs, like. So, like, Jaylen Brown is clearly not of the same caliber of Jason Tatum, but I think this is more just about Jason Tatum's, current limitations. Now, I still do think he can, like, grow into some of this. Like, part of it, the other thing that was really weird about Jason Tatum was he, like, completely inverted last year. Like, for a while, he was, like, one of the worst at-rim finishers in the NBA and would, like, really easily get knocked off. His spot, couldn't finish around the rim through contact. And a lot of times that compounded because he's also one of the league's biggest complainers. So every time like a call was missed, he'd be arguing all the way up the floor, doing all this. This year, he was like one of just an assassin, like around the restricted area, finishing through contact. He got a lot stronger, but then his shooting cratered this year compared to like past years. And
we've talked about the pull-up numbers. They're rough. And pull-up shooting is pretty volatile, but even with that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing is like you need Jason Tatum like taking over, and like at the end of the game, you're tired. It's probably a pull-up shot. Like, this is a guy whose favorite player growing up was Kobe Bryant. Like Kobe took him under his wing before he passed away. Like this is like, and I've always said that like Kobe Bryant's greatest revenge on the Boston Celtics was getting Jason Tatum to play like him, because I really feel like Jason Tatum should be playing a little bit more like Kawhi Leonard than Kobe Bryant. Like, and I think that would make the Celtics a much better team because he's just so like, I think he can be downright dominant, especially as an off-ball defender, and like kind of like, he can like people look at me like I'm crazy when I say this, but he can be kind of like a mini Giannis just in terms of like when he's kind of set free to roam as like a help defender. A lot of times they want Robert Williams in that role, who's like even more athletic, but like Jason Tatum is really good at like reading the floor and kind of jumping passing lanes, helping. He's kind of the almost the polar opposite of Jaylen Brown, who is like not a good off-ball defender at all, but could be like very solid on ball. I guess just to like kind of answer your question, I think that just this team, there was a slow drip in like, playmaking too. This is quietly not a very good passing team. And I think
they're a really bad passing team.
When Joe Mazzulla came in, he really leaned into the Morey ball. Like it was a lot about analytics, about, shooting a lot of threes, getting these threes up. And like the Celtics just were not that good of a shooting team. Like they were like, okay. They were like on, they were on the higher end. I want to say they were like between 12 and 10 or something in like 3-point percentage. And they had all this volume, but then also what that leads to is like these games where you're like blowing teams out by 30 sometimes, but then other times you're like losing games that you really should win. And I think that also compounded things because people like read that as like no heart. Because the other thing about the NBA these days that is, I've kind of had to adjust to, and I think a lot of fans who've been watching for a long time is like a 20-point lead doesn't mean the same thing today that it even meant like 10 years ago. Like that is not a safe lead. That evaporates all the time. And I think people are just watching the Celtics blow these 20-point leads, and it's like these guys are soft, these guys are babies, like, and I don't know. I think I felt very like, even though they lost Game 7 against Miami this year, I felt pretty justified when they showed off their testicular fortitude and like forced that Game 7. And it's a real shame that Jason Tatum went down like the third play of the game with an ankle injury, because I really think they could have, even though Miami blew them out.
That'll go down in Celtics lore with Kendrick Perkins' injury as another great what if that NBA media will constantly remind us about, I'm sure.
I don't know. I don't know, because they love Jimmy too. Like I can't tell you how many times like Zach Lowe said,
trust me.
A made 3 Jimmy.
You don't need to tell us about Jimmy.
Yeah.
Like, we got a full dose of like 6 games of just like Oh man, what a victory for Heat culture! It's like they won game one. Is
sucked.
that really
Yeah,
like a
that
victory
Jimmy
for Heat
sucked.
fucking culture?
Jimmy sucked in both those series. He got bailed out by Caleb Martin. So I don't know.
Tell that to Thibodeau, who was like, we gotta fucking treat him like prime Jordan.
Yeah.
Forget our
He's at the
offense.
elbow.
Priority is just our largest wings on Jimmy Butler, noted ISO specialist.
So I wanted to go back to something, and this kind of, I think, I'm gonna throw a few things out there.
Okay.
One, my thinking has been like, if you have as like when you commit your team in a lot of ways, right? Tatum and Brown are the focus of this team, and that's fine. That's a logical decision, makes sense. One, do you think it says something about them inherently as players? Not necessarily like, I mean, they're flawed. Every player is flawed. But like, not to like shit on them, but like, do you think it says something about them as players that you've rotated out various point guards? You've obviously undergone significant coaching changes in this time. You even have a new GM now, right? Like, you've made all these moves. You come in, you get a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who I don't really think is like the true floor general point guard that he gets a rep of a lot of times. He's a really great.
I think he's not good. He's like my most he's something.
he's really good at driving to the rim, right? But like, you get these.
Yeah.
So they added somebody that gets a little rim pressure, and like all of this, it's constantly, and it's okay. But like, it feels like at the end of the day, they have the same problems they have had while they've improved as a team, because Tatum's better, Brown's better, guys like Smart is better, Robert Williams healthy, whatever. They're better as a team, but their underlying issues of like, we can't run an offense at the end of games. We can't consistently get shots at the rim. We don't have a guy that can organize us consistently in the half court. So I think, like, one, me and Prez have talked about this a bunch. One, I think like it is really hard to find the proper point guard that can balance all of that shit when you have so much usage effectively tied up in Tatum and Brown. That's one. The second part is, do you think that guard is even out there? And is that somebody that the Celtics could acquire? Which I don't know. And then the third part is I think there were two kind of, if they were going to make a major change in the team, I thought there were like basically two things they could do, right? And one was you flip Brown and try to do whatever the hell you want to do there, and that's one. They obviously did not choose that. They chose to give Jaylen Brown all the money and keep him. But the other one is effectively like what they did, where they were like, we are just getting a 3-point shooting stretch 5 and trading out Smart, and like, we're going to go this way. And just, I mean, I know that Porzingis has been a really good rim protector, but this feels like a very offensive focused move that very much, like you mentioned, the Morey ball stuff with Mazzulla. Like, this feels very much like a Mazzulla, like, get me this guy and I'm going to turn your offense into this fucking juggernaut. And like, me and Prez have argued about this, like, actually, like, way too aggressively for two non-Celtics fans. But like, I think they're just diminishing returns at a certain point on, like, as good as a shooter as he is, and as much as he's like a true weapon out there versus like Horford, who is out there a lot of times. Like, I just don't know that the ancillary benefits you get from that, in terms of like, will it make life easier for Tatum and Brown to get to the rim? Like, I don't know those benefits there, but ultimately, like, that is an offensive focused thing. And there's a trade-off though, because you're trading out a guy, you mentioned this, like, why are fans like, on paper, it's like a clear talent win, but like, Smart has been there since 2014, if I'm not mistaken, 9th year. He played 9 years with the Celtics. They didn't have a long rebuild, but he was actually there for like their bad year. And it's like,
he never missed
this guy's a leader, right?
Yeah, he never missed the playoffs with the
right.
Celtics. I think they were 26 and something the year before they drafted him, and then they never missed the playoffs again after drafting him. So
it's like, do you just feel like, I know that's a lot I just threw at you, but I mean, do you think there's at least some truth to any of that, or like at least like logic to a lot of it, or what?
I think that's a lot of the, I think that's a lot of the national media discussion on this. I think a lot of, I was winding up before you brought in that last part. I was going to make a whole joke about, the perfect point guard for the Celtics, it would need to be like a pretty big guy, very strong, doesn't necessarily need the usage, but could be a good playmaker and could also switch 1 through 5. But that's just impossible that a guy like that could be the point guard for the Boston Celtics. You just can't. You can't have that. So yeah, I guess my biggest mistake, because I think that I do think that there is something to be said about not necessarily like how Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are like wired necessarily, but just like their strengths as players. I just don't think either, like, I think Jaylen Brown honestly is more of a go get a bucket when it matters guy than Jason Tatum is. The problem is that he can't dribble the basketball. And like the second he tries to do that in crunch time, you just throw 2 guys at him and he's going to cough it up, but like, if he does get a chance, like in isolation or like in a one-on-one, like Jaylen Brown has like been like very good at that stuff. Jason Tatum's like other thing about these guys is it's kind of hard to remember that they're like still not like super young, but they're still like pretty young for like, how often we've been like seeing these guys in the playoffs. So like, Jason Tatum is still kind of getting a little bit better every year. Like the passing comes along a little bit every year. We saw his at rim finishing explode last year at the cost of his jump shooting. But I think, I'm going to kind of cop out by saying like it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I think that they need I think that they do need like a not necessarily a true alpha, but just a guy who can score easier and like a little bit more like efficiently around them. And maybe that is Kristaps Porzingis. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I can definitely like see the argument. I mean, when Shams was reporting like up into the deadline that it was going to be like a first round pick and Malcolm Brogdon, I was like, absolutely, sign me up. This is amazing. Like this guy was like an all-star. But when you like pull Marcus Smart, who's like the best passer on the team, on a team that was already like a pretty bad passing team, a guy who has, the stats don't back this up, but I can just tell you as like an eye test guy, like that he really knows what he's doing in like dribble, pick and roll. Like he does when he gets the option to like can organize an offense and
he's
like
a good
understands.
Pick and roll player.
He's a great
best one on the Celtics.
Yeah, he's a great pick and roll play, and like just the chemistry he had with Robert Williams. Like there's a lot of ancillary stuff that Smart did to kind of tie this team together, and I really worry about that stuff. Like who's like Smart would secondarily quarterback the defense. There's plenty of highlights of him like worrying too much about telling guys where to stand and like blowing his own coverages. That ultimately like really doesn't happen that much like in important moments for him. For me, it just begins and ends with like Marcus Smart, and maybe I'm like just too Marcus Smart pilled. I mean, he was my favorite Celtics player, and maybe I'm just too close to this. I'm like in my feelings, but like I really feel like that's going to come back to bite the Celtics in the ass, and I think he's going to be like exactly what the Grizzlies need, and like it's kind of turned me around on where the Grizzlies are going to be. So I guess this is all a long-winded way of saying like I don't know. I could see it going either way. I mean, I think that the plan is for them to like, set offensive efficiency records this year and, records in 3-point attempts, and just have that carry the team. But I think it's going to be pretty ugly basketball, to be honest. I think it's going to be a lot of, just counting on Porzingis to shoot over guys who are closing out on him because he's like 7'4" and can just shoot over, closeouts. And then, kind of these one pass shots off of, Jason Tatum driving. But like, he got clowned on a lot. I think the Celtics are really going to miss Grant Williams a lot too. Like, especially if they end up in a Bucks series, because he's been very important for them, like against the Bucks. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. I was pretty just down on the trade from a vibes perspective, but I could see it going either way. And I mean, the other thing here is Porzingis' health, and that's just kind of flip a coin. He's already got a lower body injury, not even a month into his Celtics tenure. You guys, I'm sure, familiar with the Kristaps Porzingis experience. So,
Our good friend.
Yeah. So, on the one hand, you can look at he had this career year last year with the Wizards. He has all these insane rim protection and, like post up stats. There's all sorts of like things about him as like what an efficient scorer, and all the Celtics guys who are like clip hounds and love like pulling synergy numbers are like, tweeting out this propaganda. On the other side of the coin, he played for the Washington Wizards. I don't know what that's going to look like when he's playing with two guys who are better than him instead of being the best guy on his team, and what it looks like for a team that's actually trying to win at a high level. So I don't know. I don't feel good going into the season, but you could tell me anything. You could tell me the Celtics are 41 and 41 at the end of the season. I'd be like, yeah, I believe it. Or you could tell me they're 63 and whatever that adds up to be, 18 or 19. And I'd be like, yeah, I believe that too, so just, that, and I guess that's the variance of having a 3-point shooting team like this. I just think this is going to be a team with a lot of variance. They're going to destroy the Nuggets by like 30 at one point this year. And they're going to like lose to the Hornets, like at the buzzer. Like there's going to be shit like that going on all year. So